Unprecedented bushfires, unprecedented drought. No, this Australian summer has been the summer of unprecedented stupidity. Never before have we had to suffer such idiocy in public debate and political commentary nationally and internationally in relation to two of the most common and predictable occurrences in Australia's climate cycle, drought and bushfires.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And welcome to Groundhog Day, where the loudest voices at News Corp are adamant that the summer's terrifying bushfires have nothing to do with climate change. Or if they have, there's nothing we can do about it. And as always, welcome back to News Corp's team of hand-picked, highly paid columnists and TV hosts on Sky who are leading the chorus.
So let me deal with the issue head on. Does climate change cause these fires? No.
So that's the key, the drought. And if the drought can't be blamed on climate change, you can't blame the fires on climate change, especially when so many are deliberately lit.
What's burning in Victoria? Eucalypts. What's burning in South Australia are eucalypts. When are we going to wake up and stop using this as an excuse to justify the climate change hoax?
Passionate denial that the bushfires should make us act on climate change runs right across the Murdoch media in this country, reaching an audience of millions. But it's also echoed by Murdoch's Fox News in the US, as two former Prime Ministers noted last month.
If you go to any of the right-wing think tanks or you read the Murdoch press, it's just full of climate denialism, and it is designed to deflect from the real objective, which has to be to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
The politics of fear around, let's call it, the cost of climate change action has been well mobilised by the Conservatives and Murdoch in Australia, just as been well mobilised in the United States by the Conservatives through the echo chamber of Fox News.
So why are Murdoch's men and women so passionate in their protests? And what would it take to change their tune? Or as Malcolm Turnbull asked the BBC,
you know, how many more lives and homes have to be lost before the climate change deniers acknowledge they are wrong?
It is a fair question, and it's one that's hard to answer. But News Corp's deniers claim, remarkably, that science is on their side.
In this debate, like few others, fact is often replaced with misinformation, analysis with hysteria, evidence-based assessments with mere anecdote, or lectures from teenagers. And balance and sober discussions, well, they're long dead.
It's hard to disagree, but most bushfire experts would level that charge of ignoring the facts at Peta Credlin and her fellow climate sceptics, as this group of former fire chiefs made clear in November.
And certainly climate change is exacerbating the very, very dry conditions that we're all experiencing. Bushfires are a symptom of climate change.
I've had 39 years of Tasmania Fire Service and I didn't see too many dry lightning strikes earlier on in my career. But now, and due to climate change, we're seeing this as a regular event.
The Bureau of Meteorology has also warned that climate change is making our fires worse, and it made its verdict clear last month.
Hottest, driest year on record led to extreme bushfire season.
And 3 weeks ago, the Australian Academy of Science piped up with a similar conclusion.
The scientific evidence base shows that as the world warms due to human-induced climate change, we experience an increase in the frequency and severity of extreme weather events.
Countless climate scientists say the same, whether they are at NASA or the Royal Society, or at Britain's Met Office and the CSIRO, which have just reviewed 57 scientific studies on climate change and reached the same conclusion. But no amount of expert opinion is enough to convince the know-it-alls on Sky and 2GB and in the News Corp papers, who argue tirelessly that climate change isn't happening, or isn't to blame, and or this summer's fires are nothing new.
From Black Saturday in 2009 to Ash Wednesday in 1983, Black Tuesday in 1967, Black Friday in 1939, Black Thursday in 1851, millions of hectares were burnt. Let me assure you this is a long way from our worst ever fire season.
Tragic, yes. Unprecedented, sadly, no.
The argument that we've seen it all before was laid out in The Australian on New Year's Eve, just before the fires went nuclear on the New South Wales south coast. And it is that grass fires across remote Australia in 74-75 burnt a far larger area, while 2009's Black Saturday fires in Victoria killed far more people. But did either really match the impact of what we've seen this year? Mass evacuations, homes and businesses destroyed, 1 billion animals dead, an area 1.5 times the size of Tasmania burnt to ashes, our big cities choking with smoke, and fires still raging. It's no wonder the Australian Academy of Science concludes, for reasons you can read on our website,
The scale of these bushfires is unprecedented anywhere in the world.
Meanwhile, fire ecologist David Bowman told Media Watch that the scale, reach, duration and impact of this season's inferno makes it like no other.
There has never been a fire event that has affected the forested rim of Australia, stretching down from southeast Queensland to New South Wales to Victoria, some parts of South Australia and parts of Western Australia and Tasmania.
Once again, most bushfire experts agree. Yet, once again, the News Corp choir insists it knows better.
Climate change exaggeration, alarmism and hysteria.
Hysteria or worse?
Hysteria.
The loonies in the climate cult.
Lunatic stuff.
News Corp's ridicule of climate science is not unprecedented, and Media Watch has ripped into its columnists and reporters many times. But it's been so bad this summer that insiders have condemned it too, like Rupert Murdoch's son, James, and his wife, Catherine, who issued this public statement 3 weeks ago.
Catherine and James's views on climate are well established, and their frustration with some of the News Corp and Fox coverage of the topic is also well known. They are particularly disappointed with the ongoing denial among the news outlets in Australia, given obvious evidence to the contrary.
Note the word denial, coming from a Murdoch and director of News Corp, an extraordinary public rebuke. So, what was News Corp's reaction? Total silence. Until today, as far as we can see, the group's Australian papers had not even mentioned it. But Rupert's son wasn't the only one. A few days earlier, outgoing finance manager of The Australian, Emily Townsend, sent this damning email in which she told News Corp chairman Michael Miller,
I find it unconscionable to continue working for this company, knowing I am contributing to the spread of climate change denial and lies. The reporting I have witnessed in The Australian, The Daily Telegraph and The Herald Sun is not only irresponsible, but dangerous and damaging to our communities and beautiful planet.
Townsend received huge support from colleagues for taking that stand. We've seen several of the messages. But Michael Miller responded in a statement that News does not deny climate change or its threat, and is proud of its journalists and columnists.
Our coverage has recognised that Australia is having a serious conversation about climate change and how to respond to it. However, it has also reflected there are a variety of views and opinions about the current fire crisis.
But the main variety News has offered has been in new angles on denial, such as this news story in The Australian featuring favourite sceptic Jennifer Marahasi claiming the weatherman is lying to us.
Bureau of Meteorology cooling the past to declare record heat.
Yes, seriously, The Australian is happy to suggest that the bomb is part of a huge conspiracy. But if that was peak stupid, News Corp's frontline columnists have offered more of the same. And with this lineup, who could be surprised? Sky's big stars, featured in this ad in The Telegraph, Peter Credlin, Andrew Bolt, Paul Murray, Chris Kenny and Alan Jones, spread a similar message on man-made global warming, and they don't mince their words.
The bottom line, global warming may actually not be all bad at all.
Apparently now there's a pile-on on Scott Morrison. It's all his fault and it's climate change. I mean, these people deserve to be buried. It's just appalling.
All those Sky hosts also write columns for the News Corp papers, where like-minded souls like Miranda Devine and Piers Ackerman sing a similar tune. Their key theme this summer has been to blame the fires on the Greens and/or a lack of hazard reduction to reduce the fuel load. And on Sky and 2GB, Alan Jones has pushed that line too.
There's one reason above all others for the fire catastrophe. You can't start a fire without fuel.
Greater hazard reduction must certainly be looked at. But New South Wales Rural Fire Chief Shane Fitzsimmons insists it's no panacea, and he said publicly that this year's fires have been so fierce it would have hardly held them back.
Hazard reduction has a place and is a valuable tool for day-to-day fires, for normal seasons, but when you've got a really tough season, when you've got awful fire weather conditions, so when you're running fires under severe, extreme or worse conditions, hazard reduction has very little effect at all.
Another key argument sparked by a story in The Australian has been that arson is to blame.
Firebugs fueling crisis as arson arrest toll hits 183.
That claim, in early January, with the inferno at its height, was picked up by the Murdoch's London Sun. Tweeted in America by Donald Trump Jr., rehashed by the Murdoch's Fox News star Sean Hannity on his website, and promoted on Fox as the real cause of the fires.
So I hate to break it to the Greta Thunbergs of the world, the fact of the matter is this. Australia has an arson problem you can't pin on global warming, climate change, or whatever title you're giving your environmental boogeyman these days.
Arson is part of the bushfire story, of course, but the key issue is not what started the fires, but why they've burned so fiercely. And the Australians' figures were wrong, because not all those 183 arrests were for arson. Many included offences like breaching a fire ban or tossing a cigarette, and 43 of the arrests came before the bushfire season started. But there was plenty more online. Like this Facebook post from PragerU, a conservative American video producer, which used the original Australian article to claim that 200 arsonists had been arrested and that arson was responsible for 50% of the fires. Those claims were wrong, and the video's now been flagged as false by Facebook. But not before it was seen by 2 million people. So who is PragerU? It was set up 11 years ago by a conservative talk show host with funding from 2 Texan evangelical fracking billionaires. It now spends millions of dollars a year to spread conservative information, or in this case, misinformation. But the arson beat-up was not just on Facebook, it was also trending on Twitter, where the hashtag #ArsonEmergency was being spread by an army of bots, as the BBC explains.
One researcher analysed over 300 accounts using this hashtag. He found a third of them displayed highly automated and inauthentic behaviour, meaning they could be bots or trolls, and he concluded the conspiracy theories going around, including arson as the main cause of the fires, reflect an increased distrust in expertise and scepticism in the media.
So who is commanding this bot army? QUT's Professor Tim Graham told Media Watch there was no evidence of them being run by a single controller, but their aim was clear.
The evidence indicates that fringe right-wing accounts around the globe have jumped on the bandwagon to push and promote the narrative of arson emergency to counter the climate emergency narrative.
So, was arson actually responsible for any of the big fires? On the 9th of January, Victorian police said no.
There is no intelligence to indicate that the fires in East Gippsland and North East Victoria have been caused by arson or any other suspicious behaviour.
And according to the ABC, which crunched the numbers in mid-January,
only about 1% of the land burnt in New South Wales this bushfire season can be officially attributed to arson.
Adding,
New South Wales Rural Fire Service Inspector Ben Shepherd said earlier this week lightning was predominantly responsible for the bushfire crisis.
Despite that, the Australians' Firebug beat-up remains on its website with the headline virtually unchanged. But as the political storm over the fires continues, News Corp is perhaps showing small signs of movement. After James Murdoch's criticism, the NT News declared on its front page,
"Now is the time to discuss climate change."
And a few days earlier, the Australian conceded in this editorial,
more intense fires are an observed reality consistent with the predictions of climate change science.
And even Andrew Bolt has flirted with that idea, telling viewers last week,
I can understand some people saying, oh, look, I think global warming did play a big role in these fires. I don't personally believe it, or I think the role was minor, if anything, but I can believe it.
So, is that real change or just lip service? We'll have to wait and see. There's no doubt that climate change activists across the world think the fires should be a tipping point. And many Australians agree, with 72% of respondents to an Australia Institute poll last month saying the fires should be a wake-up call to the world. January's Ipsos Monitor also shows a huge spike in concern over the environment, with it showing as the most important issue for the first time ever. Add to that, last week, climate protests in Sydney by a couple of hundred so-called quiet Australians, and more than twice that number of people lying outside News Corp with banners saying News Corp lies all the time, so it's OK for us to lie here. So, what is News Corp's answer to this chorus of criticism? It told us in a statement,
"We publish hundreds of columnists across multiple mastheads and magazines, websites and television and other platforms. These represent a wide range of views, opinions and positions on a range of topics. You identify a handful of columnists to suit your own agenda. To suggest, as Media Watch is doing, that on major issues in Australia there cannot be many opinions aired across media platforms is contrary to the role of free and open media."
We do not suggest that for a moment. Our point is that News Corp's star columnists, whom the group heavily promotes, all sing from the same song sheet on climate change. And that matters because it stops the debate from moving on. The Science Media Centre told Media Watch that having influential voices which do not reflect the science
creates confusion, uncertainty and apathy among the public, even when the science is quite clear.
Rupert Murdoch assured shareholders last year there are no climate change deniers at News Corp. But sadly, that is just not true.